cardiologist will do this test after you've had heart surgery or some other kind of procedure to see the stress on your heart.
What's the test?
BNP,
Oh, that.
B-type natriuretic peptide. Yeah. So cardiologists do order this test if you already have heart disease to see how you're doing. But usually, if it's elevated, they just say, you know, enjoy the time you have left. There's nothing. So if you're over a certain age, there's nothing they can do about it. Because there's no drug that can lower BNP. There's no drug that can facilitate the healing of the heart muscle so that you can get that number back down again. Well, all you need to do is take coenzyme Q10. And sometimes a lot of it. But, you know, the standard dose is 100 milligrams, but I've had people take 1,200 milligrams for a while, or 900 milligrams for a few weeks or a few months, and 300 or 400 milligrams forever sometimes if they're older and have had a heart attack before, because they're swelling in their ankles and the shortness of breath and all the signs that they're about ready to drop dead from a worn out heart will go away, and they'll live years past that. But it's not a drug, so medical doctors don't know anything about it. So that's why they don't routinely do that test. They should, because you can get information you can't get any other way. So hardening of the arteries is what causes most heart disease. The risk factors are just being older, being overweight, having a family history of heart disease. Most people know about that, but also smoking, diabetes, and high blood pressure. And you know, so here's what a plaque looks like, a section of an artery. And it's actually caused by little micro tears. So arteriosclerosis, hardening the arteries, is not caused by cholesterol. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm more likely to have arteriosclerosis, heart disease, hardening the arteries if I have high cholesterol. That may be true or not. There was a study of 53,000 hospital admissions of people with heart attack and stroke compared to people that didn't, and half the people admitted for heart attack or stroke had normal or low cholesterol, and they still ended up in a hospital with a heart attack or stroke. Why? Because cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. It's strongly associated with it. So if you start to get plaques forming, inflammation from stress, laziness, poor diet, and heart disease, oh, here it is, yeah, 53,000. That's what causes the initiation of the process. And so what it starts out with, there's 3 layers of your blood vessel. The outer layer, it's like a garden hose, is a connective tissue layer made of mostly collagen. So that's the integrity of the vessel itself. And then there's a relatively thick muscular layer that allows the blood vessels to expand and contract. And then there's a very thin lining that you can barely even see here, but it's kind of like a mesh, maybe like pantyhose, the silk pantyhose, that it lines the lining of the blood vessels to make it smooth, so that all the stuff that's flying through there all the time can flow smoothly and not get stuck to the walls in the way. Well, that thin mesh-like layer becomes more susceptible to little tiny micro tears if you have a lot of inflammation, any kind of inflammation, from any kind of stress, physical, chemical, emotional, bad food. Your body produces things like interleukins and cytokines that are part of your body's immune response to break down things that need to be broken down and healed, but also just a reaction to any kind of virus or bug, or sometimes just stress. And when those things are elevated in your blood, it tends to make that mesh brittle and prone to little tears. So when you get little tears in that, just like when you get a tear in your skin, your body's going to make a scab to heal that tear. That's how hardening of the artery starts. You get little tiny microscopic tears in the lining of that inner lining. Your body starts to form a scab, which is mostly fibrin, collagen, which is the scar tissue that bridges that gap to heal it. And then calcium and cholesterol become embedded in that scar. So if you have a bunch of those scars, and high cholesterol, then the cholesterol will build up, attach itself, it gets stuck. The LDL, bad cholesterol, gets stuck and makes those plaques get bigger.
So is the blood touching the cholesterol? Like, so the blood's running through?
There's cholesterol in your blood, in your
right.
serum, and there's red blood cells and white blood cells.
So can you just go back a slide? I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I messed you up.
It doesn't make it easy to go back, but it's still possible.
So see the yellow dots, right? The yellow dots.
That's the cholesterol getting embedded in the wall.
And so those red blood cells are sliding past those yellow dots.
Yes.
And that's what's causing the friction and the potential buildup.
It doesn't block the red blood cells from getting by until it completely blocks the artery. but the cholesterol is building up in the wall, starting to form a plaque that will get bigger and bigger and eventually occlude the space of the artery.
Okay, so it's the inflammation that's making it grow bigger and bigger and bigger.
The inflammation
And so
creates,
there's less room for the blood to flow through.
yes, but the inflammation the inflammation causes little tears that then have to be healed, and so it's those little tears that drive the formation of the plaques. That's why if you don't have a lot of tears, if you don't have a lot of inflammation, you won't have a lot of tears. You can have your cholesterol can be 300, and you can have a low risk of heart disease. Your BNP will be low. Your CRP, measure of inflammation, will be low. Your SED rate, other measures of inflammation, will be low. There's either more sophisticated blood tests that measure the most atherogenic forms of cholesterol. In addition to the standard total good and bad cholesterol, there is oxidized LDL, oxidized bad cholesterol, and also small particle. Those are the ones that are the most likely to increase your plaque formation. Even those will be low. You can still have a high total cholesterol and not have a high risk of heart disease because you don't have all that inflammation creating all the tears that need the scabs to form in the first place. So think of the artery as a tunnel of muscle, and then there's your endothelium there, and the torn pantyhose on the little picture up there. And the LDL bad cholesterol is kind of like Nerf balls, right? They're squishy, they're easy to get, they get sticky, and they easily stick to the walls of the blood vessels. The good cholesterol is high density. HDL stands for high density lipoprotein. And so those are more like golf balls. And when you have more of those flying through and bouncing against the walls of your arteries, it knocks the Nerf balls loose. So the good cholesterol is hard golf balls, locking the gooey, sticky LDL cholesterol loose, so it's less likely to increase the size of any plaques that are forming in your arteries. And so that's why it's a good idea to consume omega-3 fatty acids from fish oil and oily fish, because that tends to increase your HDL. It's more important to have a high amount of HDL than it is to have a low total cholesterol. So here's a 75-year-old man that came to me who had a heart attack. He had a double bypass surgery while visiting family in Minnesota. And I didn't see him for 5 months. He was coming in to me just for his arthritis in his neck every couple of weeks. When he finally came in, he was pale, weak, couldn't drive, his ankles were swollen. His BNP test was almost 400, and his cardiologist told him that was normal for his age. So I put him on 1,200 milligrams of CoQ10, plus a few other nutrients, and in 2 months his ankle swelling was half of what it was. His ankles were swollen up the size of his thighs. And before that, the last time I'd seen him, before he had that procedure, he looked like a fit jogger. He always wore shorts, and his legs were fit.
Did his cardiologist tell him that the ankle swelling was normal for his age?
He just told him there's nothing he can do about it. You can put him on a diuretic, but you can only do that for so long. Yeah, it doesn't fix the problem. It just helps your kidney flush out water faster, and has lots of side effects. So yeah, he basically just told him that there was nothing he could do. So I put him on a high dose of CoQ10, a few other nutrients. The ankle swelling was reduced by half after a couple of months. Reduced the CoQ10 to 900 milligrams. At 4 months, his ankle swelling and fatigue were gone. He was driving again, and he looked and felt better than he did before the surgery. When somebody's had a heart attack or they're in their 70s or older, most medical doctors think it's impossible to get the B in. They're happy if they can get it below 200, even though the medical normal. They just think everybody normally has that much stress on their heart, and there's nothing you can do about it because there's no drug that will fix it. And they don't use nutrients by and large, so they don't know that CoQ10 will fix it. There was even a study, there's a book I have out front there that's called What Your Doctor Doesn't Know About Nutritional Medicine May Be Killing You by Dr. Strang. And his wife he was just a general practitioner. His wife had congestive heart failure, and he found out about CoQ10, gave it to her, and it saved her life. It was miraculous. And so that's why he made that the title of his book, because doctors just don't know about that. Well, somewhere in his book, I think, that's where the first place I saw this, then it comes up again in the medical press every couple of years. They do studies where they'll ask cardiologists, do you take fish oil? Yes. Do you take coenzyme Q10? Yes. Do you take folate and B12? Yes. Do you take vitamin D? Yes. Do you recommend any of those to your patients? No. Why not? Oh, because there's no evidence that they work. Yes, there is. Reams of it. It's available on the National Institutes of Health PubMed website. You just have to look for it. It might not be on the front cover of JAMA,
The pharma companies just tell them what to prescribe, what not to prescribe. They're not gonna make commission off of.
Most of the education, either continuing education they get, it doesn't really matter where your doctor went to school, it doesn't matter if your doctor went to Harvard or, Princeton. What matters is what education did they get the last 5 years? All doctors are required to maintain their education every year. But what are they studying? Well, most medical doctors are just getting marketing from pharmaceutical companies. They're going to conferences that are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies, where the whole content is the latest drugs to fix problems largely of aging, of chronic disease, and it's kind of too late then. You can manage disease at that point. You're not going to fix the problem. But CoQ10 enables your heart to heal and repair itself. That's why it works. It's not treating the BNP. It's enabling your heart to heal and repair the muscle cells in the heart.
So does that protocol actually reverse the cholesterol, the little yellow dots?
No.
So once the yellow dots are there, they're there?
There are other things that can somewhat reduce the plaque formation. So there's there are things called systemic enzymes like serrapeptase and nattokinase that break down the fibrin component, which is the scar tissue that starts to form the clot. It can slowly break that down over months and years and shrink it somewhat. There are chelation therapies where they use an IV nutrient that removes calcium from your blood, and it's kind of controversial because it was kind of in favor in the 90s. A lot of people were doing it. I had a colleague up in Ohio that was doing it, but you don't hear so much about it anymore. So really what works better is just to exercise, to keep your blood flowing, keep the pipes clear, eat good food, have an anti-inflammatory diet, and that tends to reduce the inflammation that's driving the plaque formation in the first place and can somewhat reverse it. So yeah, this man's BNP, we got it down to 132, and I think about a year later, we got it down to 97.
Wow.
Even when he was, he was 80 by then, got it down to below 100.
Wow.
Yeah. And he lived 8 years after this incident. And when he first came in, he looked like he had about a few months to live. It was just, it can be what people call a miracle, because you don't understand how that happened. Feels miraculous. Every situation is different, but it can be really dramatic depending on the situation. So here's a 49-year-old woman that came in with dizziness, no signs of heart disease except shortness of breath, and they gave her an inhaler, which didn't help because it's nothing wrong with her lungs. And so I'm a non-force chiropractor as well, and sometimes people have so much tension in the muscles of the ribs. There's little muscles in between each pair of ribs that can get tight. Can get so tight, when you breathe in and out, at 75% is the diaphragm moving up and down, sucking air in and out of the lungs. 25% is your rib cage expanding and contracting. So if you have so much tension in those muscles that your rib cage can't move, then you can get shortness of breath, because you're only potentially able to use your diaphragm and not the rib muscles at all. And you can feel that just on a physical exam. Well, her rib cage felt like it was made out of steel. The whole thing was immobile. And so all I had to do was do a technique I learned from a craniosacral therapist called compression, where you just hold those muscles in a certain way that makes them relax. Spasmed muscles are kind of like scared children. They just need to be calmed and convinced that it's safe to let go. So I did that on her 3 times, and the shortness of breath and her headaches and all of her symptoms were gone. I said we need to do it probably 2 or 3 more times because it's not completely relaxed yet, and then we'll redo your BNP. So I think I worked on her 5 or 6 times, and a couple weeks later, her BNP was down to 20. So her rib cage was so tight that it was not only making it difficult for her to breathe, but it was constricting the space her heart had. It was putting enough stress on her heart to cause that test to go up, 6 or 7 times the upper limit of normal, and then it just dropped right back down once we released that tension.
Was it an indication of potential heart attack, that number, BNP, or no?
Yeah, it's a heart attack waiting to happen. A little bit more stress.
From just restricted.
So, heart attacks mostly are caused by hardening of the arteries. So she had no signs of hardening of the arteries. Her echocardiogram was all negative, which means they would have ruled out problems with the valves or any kind of arrhythmia. Her EKG was normal. So yeah, she might not have ever had a heart attack, but it can feel like you're having one. And just the stress of that, is added. So no one knows how much hardening of the arteries they have unless they get an angiogram, unless you inject dye into the blood vessels and x-ray that. That's the only way you can actually see the diameter of the blood vessels. Or you go into a cath lab where they feed a little camera in there, you can check it that way too. So yeah, she was probably not at high risk of a heart attack, but you know,
And her shortness of breath went away as
just
well?
disappeared after 2 weeks. Yeah. So anyone can lower their cholesterol and reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease without drugs. There was a 71-year-old female with high cholesterol, didn't want to take statins, so I recommended adding niacin, berberine, and turmeric, which is a natural anti-inflammatory. Niacin and berberine both help directly lower cholesterol, and I recommend that she reduce her intake of grain, starch, and sugar, because that is a pro-inflammatory diet. If you eat a lot of empty carbs, that creates inflammation. Your body converts that to triglycerides in your bloodstream, which is inflammatory, eventually stores it as fat, and during that process, you're having increased inflammatory cytokines, potentially creating little micro tears in your blood vessels that whole time. So she did that. She already had a good exercise routine. She was in her 70s. I think she was 71. And her total cholesterol dropped from 245 to 184. 70 points. So, you know, sometimes statins won't even drop it that low, or that much. And her LDL went from 153 to 108. The total, interestingly, total cholesterol, some blood tests get the numbers increase as the population gets sicker and older. They just make that the new average. They make that the new normal. If everyone has this broad bad of a test marker and they're not dropping dead, then that's the new normal. There's a test called uric acid that is the diagnostic for gout. But if your uric acid is elevated, it's going to increase your risk for any kind of arthritis because it irritates your joints. And they just raised the number for that by a whole point. Went from 6.4 to 7.4 is now considered normal. Well, that's why we use these narrow functional ranges, because those don't go. We don't raise those just because people are sicker. But the two exceptions are cholesterol and blood sugar. So it's a good. They've mainly lowered blood sugar so they can put more people on metformin. But it is also good that they did that because that is healthy. It is good for people to keep their blood sugar below 99, the upper limit of glucose diagnosis for diabetes is a glucose of 125 or higher. But at 100 or higher, the blood sugar is starting to damage your blood vessels and your nerves. So they lowered that, and they lowered the A1C, which is the test that measures your 3 months worth of your average blood sugar. They've lowered that from diagnosis for diabetes is still 6.5. Pre-diabetes used to be 6, and now they've lowered that to 5.6. And that's a good thing. Well, cholesterol, the normal used to be 240. Total cholesterol normal used to be 240. And the LDL, I think, was 120 or 125. So I'm not really worried about it if someone's cholesterol is 245, if their the markers of inflammation, their erythrocyte sedimentation rate, the viscosity of their blood, and their CRP, ferritin. There's a couple of other markers you can test to see if their inflammation is under control, and they don't have they don't have high blood pressure, they're not a smoker, they don't have a family history of heart disease, then it doesn't really matter if your cholesterol's a little high, because you probably don't have a lot of plaque forming that are going to get thicker when your cholesterol's a little high. But she did have some of those risk factors, and so we got it under control.
I think you said you were mostly looking at the LDL, high LDL, not the total, right? And low.
Yeah, we want a good HDL, a good high HDL, an adequate HDL to keep the bad under control is more important than getting the total down. It is still important to try and get the LDL down to 125, 120 or less. The recommended is 100 or less. 68-year-old woman, high cholesterol, didn't want to take statins. Same plan, told her to eat a better diet. She already had some good exercise routine. Bergamot BPF is one of the main products I use. Niacin is another one. There's a product called Pantethine that also helps directly lower cholesterol. And I recommend that there's 3 things I recommend everyone take, and that is a good multivitamin, 5,000 units of vitamin D. Vitamin D will directly help prevent heart disease and reduce your risk of most cancers if you just maintain a healthy blood level of vitamin D. No one gets enough to do that from the sun. No one gets enough to do that from the sun. Oh, but I garden and I've got short sleeves on. No one gets. How do you know? You do the blood test, your vitamin D blood test that your medical doctor will tell you your vitamin D is fine if it's above 30. That will not keep your immune system strong. It will slow down osteoporosis. It will not keep your immune system strong. People have a blood level of 50 to 90 in their vitamin D test. Don't get colds and flus that last a month or 2 months. They last a day or two, or they don't get them at all. And when they didn't die from COVID, those are the people that didn't die when they got COVID. Are much less likely to. But it also reduces your risk of most cancers and heart disease. So 5,000 units of vitamin D is what most adults need to take to maintain that healthy level. And if you go out in the sun, then your body, it won't go too high. So even better. It's a good idea to sunbathe. But if you have clothes or sunscreen on, you're not making any vitamin D from that sun. It's still good to sunbathe without sunscreen on for half the time it takes you to burn, and then put your sunscreen on.
Now, is it true that if you do the sun and you go out there and you do like that, if you come in the house and then take a shower, that you stop the vitamin D process from happening in your skin? I heard that if you're going to go sunbathe for vitamin D,
there is a
you
time.
have to
I don't remember what the exact time factor is, but it does take a little bit of time for that process to occur. It's a good idea to rinse the sweat off when you come in for another reason.
Sure.
For another reason, sweating is one of the natural ways your body flushes out heavy metals and other chemical toxins. So when you're sweating, especially if you're going to a sauna or just exercising, doing anything that makes you sweaty, it's a really good idea to wash that sweat off immediately, because that's full of toxins that your body just successfully flushed out. That's why sometimes sweat can even smell kind of metallic or like chemical. And so if you don't wash that off, if you're exercising, you're sweaty, okay, I'll just go over here and do this, or don't wash that off immediately, it gets sucked back in. So that's a good reason to wash that off quickly. Just give me one pill. If you're only going to take one pill, take 5,000 units of vitamin D. That's one pill that will do you a lot of good. One-day multivitamins the main reason you can get vitamins from food. Most people don't get enough minerals. The main reason I recommend a multivitamin, which is always a multi-mineral as well, is for the minerals. Most people do not get enough selenium and manganese and molybdenum and chromium and zinc and things like that in their food. Partly because there's not enough of it in the soil anymore that our food is grown in. Unless you're eating good organic food and you're eating a lot of dark green leafy vegetables every day, those are good sources of spinach, kale, broccoli. But most people don't get enough minerals. So then a good multivitamin, how do you tell? It's 4 capsules a day. There's a couple that are 3, but the one I recommend for everyone is called Alpha Base by Orthomolecular Products. It's 4 caps a day, because the minerals that are kind of like, as close as you can get to the ones that are in plants, are bulky. They take up space. A good dose of them won't fit into one little tablet. So yeah, people do that, can lower their cholesterol and reduce the risk of heart disease. So the American Heart Association is bought and paid for by Big Pharma. Their recommendations come directly, but here take statins. Lipitor, Zocor, Propanol, Crestor.
Oh, you don't take cholesterol.
Yeah, most of the people that listen to my show are already. Yeah, I mean, I get all kinds of patients. I have patients in all over the country. I have patients in New York, New Jersey, Florida, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Nebraska, Washington. So all kinds of people from all over. Some people are on statin drugs and they want to keep taking them because they're scared that if they stop, they'll have a heart attack. But most people that come to me already don't. Or that's one of the reasons they're calling. Oh, my doctor told me I have to take Lipitor. I heard that you can help me get my cholesterol down without that. So yeah, and this explains why. Even well, anyway.
So they lowered the so-called healthy range because they want to put the young people.
They want to put kids
people
on them. They don't want to put them in the water.
It's the biggest money maker, that thing.
Yeah. So it's crazy. I mean, it does. So why do they do that? So even honest doctors want to do that because they are convinced it will reduce your risk of heart disease. Well, it's not necessarily going to reduce your risk of heart disease. It will reduce the American population. Has been reducing the risk of heart disease in the sick, overweight, hyper-inflammatory, crappy food eating, no exercising, sedentary American populace that has diabetes and high blood pressure. Taking a statin will, on average, reduce it. It will reduce it in about half of them. The other half, it will have no effect on. And if you're not overweight and poorly controlled diabetes and high blood pressure and stressed and eat a reasonably good diet and exercise a little bit, then they're not going to help you either, because you could do that with other things, the things that I just mentioned. So the most sensitive organ in your body to any kind of inflammation or stress or chemical toxins or heavy metals is your brain. And most degenerative brain conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are caused by the same process. They're caused by hardening of the arteries. They're caused by lack of oxygen. So lack of oxygen and other nutrients to the cells causes your brain to atrophy, causes brain cells to die. And so by the time you have first signs of memory loss, you've usually lost 30% of that part of your brain before you have the first symptom. But you can't get that back. You can still do things, you can survive, we only use a tiny fraction of our brain cells anyway, and you can do things that require your body to require more brain activity. Anything that requires you to think on your feet, so doing crosswords isn't gonna keep you sharp. But having a study group or a book group or a religious study or anything where you're getting together with people and talking about something and question and answer where you have to think on your feet, that causes your brain, that uses a huge amount of brain activity. It's something you can do by yourself, just listen to music. Engages a large part of your brain. So it's this activities that cause regions throughout your brain to fire one nerve over here, fires another over here, and a lot of activity, electroactivity going back and forth between large numbers of cells throughout your brain. That's what keeps the pathways in your brain working and can maintain your ability to stave off the symptoms of dementia. So anything you think of to prevent heart disease will also contribute to having a healthy functioning brain for your whole life. So a simple way to think about this is keep the pipes clear by reducing your risk of arteriosclerosis with the things we talked about. Keep your blood pressure low. High blood pressure has no symptoms either. Everybody should get it checked at least once a year. Because what does it feel like when you have high blood pressure? I feel fine. It has no symptoms. You have no idea if your blood pressure's high unless you check it. And there's lots of things you can do to lower your blood pressure without taking medication for that. However, I tell all kinds of people to not take statin drugs. It's malpractice for me to literally say that, but I'll say it's your choice. Here's some other options. But I routinely tell people, and the same thing with osteoporosis drugs. They're terrible. Most of them are terrible, and they don't even make your bones stronger. They just make your test look prettier. But if you're for that reason, a lot of people come and say, I want to get off all of my drugs. What do I need to do? I said, well, if you have high blood pressure, you need to take your blood pressure medication. If you have high blood pressure and you're not taking medication, I sometimes recommend that people go get on high blood pressure. You need to protect your heart. If your pressure is consistently over 140 over 90, or especially if it's way over that, and nothing that you're doing or that I'm helping you do after a couple of months or so is getting that down, then it's a good idea to take high blood pressure medication for a while. And that doesn't mean you have to take it forever. Sometimes you just need to get a little support until you can figure out what else is stressing you. And then you can do some things that are relaxing and some nutrients that can get your pressure back under control and then potentially get off of that medication. So you got to keep the pipes clear, keep the pressure low, and keep the pump strong by doing some kind of physical movement. Move your body in any way that you like. The best form of exercise is the one that you'll actually do.
and it's specifically so-called cardio exercise.
Yeah, even just walking. So 10,000 steps has long been the benchmark. Studies in Japan show that people that got 10,000 steps a day, which is about 5 miles, I think. Don't quote me on that. Steps in, every step counts, but it's more refined now. It actually counts more to get fewer steps, but in short bursts, like when you're actually walking. So park your car at the opposite end of the parking lot when you're shopping, and get that consistent activity for a couple minutes at a time. That actually will lower your risk of heart disease more than just counting every step when you're just sort of doing normal activity that doesn't get your heart rate up at all. Right? You want to get your heart rate up a little bit when you're doing some of those steps. If you do that, then as little as 4,000 steps a day, according to the most recent data, is almost to the same amount to reduce your risk of heart disease. So you want to do some activity that gets your heart rate up enough that you start to feel like you're struggling to breathe, or it's a little bit difficult to talk like that. Yeah, that's a good easy way to talk. Or you can get smart meter, a Fitbit, or a smart watch, or a Fitbit, or one of those Oura rings. All kinds of devices now that can directly measure that stuff for you too. So this is the 55. It's actually 55-point blood panel that I do now, and so most doctors they don't do any of the ones that are in red. They don't check your A1C, which is for diabetes. They don't check your uric acid. They usually don't check magnesium. They'll do your kidney test, the first urea nitrogen creatinine bonding creatinine ratio. Those are all for your kidneys. Electrolytes, and the next few total protein. They'll do these 2 liver enzymes, but not this third one, which is liver and pancreas. I've seen a lot of people that have these 2 normal liver enzymes, but the GGT, which is liver and pancreas, is off the charts. 2, 3, 4, 5 times the upper limit of normal. So that's why I do these tests on everybody, because we find things that otherwise people will spend another decade not knowing it's elevated. Sedimentation rate, CRP, we talked about, those are measures of inflammation. Vitamin D I test on everybody for reasons we talked about. Ferritin will also go up if you have inflammation. Ferritin is your body's storage form of iron. I do it on everybody because a lot of times people also have functional iron deficiency anemia, and not know it, because even if their doctor did do a CBC and their hemoglobin, that's the first thing they look at, that can be normal. But if the storage tank is empty, then that means your bone marrow is just barely able to keep the hemoglobin up in a normal range with the tiny amount of iron you have left, and you're still going to be fatigued and functionally anemic, and if you take a little bit of iron, then you feel normal again. And that puts slight anemia, puts constant mild stress on your heart, because you have crappy red blood cells that aren't moving as much oxygen, so your heart has to pump harder to circulate the less efficient carriers of oxygen to all of your cells. And some of these others are signs of muscle turnover. Test. It's a good test, but you really only know how your body's working. This is a little out of date too. I test free T3 on everyone. That is the functional form, the active form. So you really don't know. Even people that are on, usually women, that are on levothyroxine or Synthroid, the standard medical treatment for low thyroid. Even if their TSH looks normal or their T4 looks normal when they're on that medication, they can still be functionally low thyroid because the body's not converting the carrier form into the active T3 form. So that's easy to identify with a free T3 test, and it's easy to fix with a couple of supplements most of the time. Any questions? Hospital or some group they're affiliated with, or Quest. Quest is bigger in Ventura County. LabCorp is bigger nationwide. They're both fine. I get a little bit better pricing with LabCorp. And some things, most of them are about the same, but for example, that BNP test is $48 from LabCorp. It's $153 at Quest.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are some things like that that are a huge difference.
So if our insurance covers Quest,
So to get your blood work done by your insurance, you have to go to your insurance doctor. It doesn't matter what lab you go to. Insurance has to do with what doctor you go to and whether or not that doctor has a relationship with that insurance company.
oh,
So I don't have connections to any insurance company, so you have to pay out of pocket. But that 55 point
But you
blood
get
panel,
the truth.
well, you get a lot more information for that money. That 55
Oh, for sure.
point blood panel would cost your insurance $1,400. That's why most doctors will routine is medically unnecessary to order those tests. Medical necessity is based on a suspicion of a medical condition that they need to complete the diagnosis of so that you can treat it with medical care. That's medical necessity. So if I just want to see if you're healthy or not, that's literally not medically necessary. And so, with cost insurance $1,400. Sometimes if you had a good relationship with your doctor, I'll give you the list and you can ask your doctor to order that. Sometimes they will, once at least. They usually won't order a follow-up. And then your insurance will pay for it. Because anything your insurance doctor orders is considered, medically necessary because they ordered it for you. But they'll usually only do that once. So I get that panel, $1,400 panel for $250. And they have to pay me to interpret it and give my recommendation as well. The initial workup with that panel, first appointment, I have you fill out a 7-page questionnaire, go through your answers to that question, determine what tests you need. So I might do that 80% of the time. I do that 50-point panel, 55-point panel. Another 10% of the time I'll do that and some other tests, like maybe we'll do some hormone tests. If we need to check your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, or heavy metal toxins. I recommend that for a lot of people. If you have an autoimmune condition or unexplained fatigue that isn't completely explained by the blood work, or risk factors for exposure to those things, which is almost everybody. I recommend actually that everyone do that at some point, but whether or not it's a priority to do right at the outset varies a little bit. I also sometimes, if somebody has a severe gut condition or an autoimmune condition or a rash, those are often caused by disruptions in your gut. I might recommend a stool test to identify that part of the picture as well. And then if somebody's really fit and healthy, sometimes I don't even recommend that whole panel. I might just recommend some supplements based on their case history. But that initial workup usually costs about $700.
Can we
First
pay with
appointment,
HSA?
blood
Do you
test.
have health savings will pay for it?
Sorry?
My health savings pays for a lot of things.
Oh yeah, you can use your health savings account for
Cool.
it. Yeah, so like if you have a
Okay.
MasterCard or Visa connected to that,
Yeah,
you can use that,
I
totally
do.
fine.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
you'll do that all the time.
Alright.
Yeah.
No, I've heard of that. You can tell me more.
Health savings account? So a lot of people have high deductible, less